Growing up, I've always kind of thought that life was difficult. And I say that because I remembered being a child and seeing my relatives, whom most of them lived in poverty or just overall not so great circumstances. And then there'll be me who will be living a very comfortable life to the point where I would be able to go on yearly vacations with my parents. And I guess me being a child and seeing my relatives being in these types of circumstances, as well as my parents kind of noticed that I was picking up on the fact that a lot of my family didn't live the life that I did, which kind of caused them to develop a very much pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, and as well as I for a while. And I kind of want to get to the bottom of that. Cue the music. So I noticed something as I was writing the script. I noticed I was using the word body and bodies a lot. So the word of the day in this episode will be body. And I want you to keep this word in mind because it will be a very important word that will be popping up multiple times in this episode. So when I was a kid, for a while, I believed that every person who was homeless or poor or who lived in poverty, I've always thought that they themselves made certain decisions for them to be in the situation that they in. And not to say that isn't always true, but I feel like a lot of people thinking this way, thinking that every person who is living in poverty or who is poor are only at the fault of themselves for them being in that situation, which yet again, that sometimes can be true, but a lot of people, because they think that way, it absolves any responsibility for the system that we live in. And I think that's because we were oftentimes sold a dream, the dream of if you work hard, you'll get everything that you want in life. But at the same time, this doesn't correlate to the fact that our generation, and by our generation, I'm referring to millennials and Gen Z, who go to college after they graduate from high school, or they'll be working multiple jobs and they feel like they are not being compensated for the work that they've done. And there's a reason for that. Like wages, they remain stagnant as everything gets more expensive. And people have to work even harder these days. And no matter how much effort we young people put in, we aren't getting what we want and asked for. Because they say if you go to college, you'll be able to get a good job and you'll be able to secure a good life. But the job market is absolutely terrible. And we're going to get into that later on in the episode. But like I was saying, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. People will be making $2,000, $3,000 a month, and they're living in apartments where rent is literally the same, and they barely have any money for themselves after they pay their rent, let alone their bills. They don't, if they even have the money to pay their bills. But the thing is, living these days is not affordable. And everybody knows this, and everybody's picking up on it. But here's the thing though, in this type of system, you're seen more so as a body to be used and disposed of, a body where you can sleep for 4 hours, you work for 8 hours, you come home, you only have the evening to yourself, you eat, and then you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you repeat the same thing, and that is your life. You don't have the time or the energy to be around yourself to be human, to spend time with friends and family, to find love. Your body is seen as something that oftentimes can be exploited by another person. And you kind of think that's a bit dehumanizing, right? Well, it makes sense. A lot of people these days are slaves. As hard as that sounds. Now, I'm not comparing this to slavery in like the 18th century, but it's in a way does feel a tad bit like slavery. The fact that what's the point of you working or doing any of this if you can't live off of it and you're always tired, you're always out of money. But moving on to the next section, this kind of brings me to want to talk about creativity and how creativity is oftentimes punched down in capitalism. People who are going to school for creative based jobs like me, I remembered a few years ago, I went to a family thing and an auntie asked me what I'm going to school for because I told her that I'm currently in college. And when I told her that I was getting a art degree, and she told me that I would be more impressed if you were be going to school to become a nurse. And it kind of goes to show that I feel like we're getting to the point where a lot of people don't see them going to school or see school as worthy or see themselves as worthy unless they're getting some type of job where they feel like they can contribute to society. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, people going to school to become doctors and lawyers and just any job where you can contribute to the system. But those who also have a passion for creativity, for music, for art, a lot of people believe that there is no jobs for these types of people going to school. And that's not true. Creative based jobs do exist. And if you are going to school for anything creative based, I just want to let you know there are definitely jobs out there for you to find. It may not be easy if you're not living in a bigger city, but they exist. But for most people, when they graduate from college, well, let me start over. So when you don't go to college, you get a job where you're making pennies for most people. But if you have a high school degree and you graduate, you're going to a lot of times you wind up working for a different job where you get slightly more pennies. And a lot of the companies that we're working at is somehow contributing to the harm of the world. Like, I don't want to go too into detail, but a lot of them are contributing, a lot of these companies are contributing harm to the environment, or whether that be to other countries and other places and other groups of people. And on top of that, the job market is also very terrible right now. Most people who get college degrees these days have a hard time finding the job that they want that is related to their degree. Like the college to career pipeline is slowly dwindling away. And the goal for you when you're living in this type of system is for you to just be able to contribute and become a copy paste individual like everybody else. So we all have been lonely before or have been feeling lonely these days. And I have been noticing this discourse online, and I myself, I'm very interested in this discourse, inside this discourse, and it's called the loneliness epidemic. And a lot of people want to somehow apply this to only men, saying that there is a male loneliness epidemic. But the truth is, everybody is becoming more and more lonely. Not just men, women as well. And this is mainly due to the fact that capitalism contributes to the idea of hyper individualism, the idea of you just having your own stuff. And nothing is really community based, community shared. You have your own ways of transportation. You have your own ways of just working and coming home, and you not having much time. Yet again, like I said before, you don't have much time to yourself or to other people. The only time you're running on is the time you have for your job. And this creates a very isolating feeling for any person who is dealing with this. And a lot of people also don't talk about how capitalism affects love in relationships and dating. Since people don't have much time for themselves or for their families or for just living life, they also have issues with finding a partner. People these days don't have time for romance, they just have time for work. And this hits home for me personally because currently I am trying to date a guy, and I do think his job overworks him. He only gets 1 day, one free day, even though you're supposed to have 2 free days. And because his company refuses to hire new people, they just basically overwork the little employees they have. And when he wakes up at like 6 in the morning to get ready for his job. And then he comes home in the evening and he doesn't have much time to do anything other than that. And it kind of just makes me feel some type of way because it's like, how are we supposed to date? How are we supposed to be in, or well, how are you expected to be in a relationship with me if you don't even have the time to be around me? And I'm not upset at him per se. I'm more upset at his job, the fact that they're not willing to give him much free time to do anything else, but what he can do is just to work all the time. Yeah, very grueling hours for a lot of people. Most people work 8 hours a day, and then you get people who work for like 12 to 17. I actually met a woman at Waffle House. I met a Waffle House employee because I go to Waffle House sometimes. I just like to eat there when I was, at my old job. And this woman told me that she worked for 36 hours straight. She worked for over a whole day straight, and she didn't get any sleep. Like, no human being should be working for 36 hours straight. That's crazy. But a lot of people work, not the regular 40 hours a week. Some people work double that. I've heard stories of people who were working 80 hours a week and they're still struggling, and that's not normal. But back onto the topic of dating and relationships underneath capitalism. A lot of people internalize this type of mindset. A lot of people internalize capitalism through the way they perceive dating and relationships. I don't watch reality television, but I actually am hearing people who do watch reality television. There's this really popular show called Love is Blind, and it's a show about these people who are contestants on this show, and they have to get to know a person without looking at their face. And at the end of the season, they actually meet their partners and they see what their partners look like, and then they wind up getting married in the end because they wind up matching with them. Something like that. I could be wrong, but that's kind of pretty much the gist of it. But lately, people are complaining, and there's a discourse online that the newer contestants on this television show, on this reality TV show, are only on the show to push their brand out. They're only on the show to push their brand out. They're not on the show to find love or to be married or find anything genuine. They're just there to boost their money and capital up, which goes to show how this type of system rots the hearts and minds of individuals. It's like, are you here to find connection or are you here for capital? And due to people being more isolated, a lot of people aren't getting married. Marriage rates are declining, birth rates are also declining. But then again, that's also issues that capitalists have. Like, capitalists want people to have more kids because they need more workers for their machine. And because your body is seen as your worth and how much you can put into these jobs. Our infrastructure is also a reflection of our system and our economy as well. Like, have y'all noticed that suburbs are placed outside of cities where everyone is way more isolated and there's nothing going on? Like, it's kind of just dead. All you see in these types of neighborhoods are just pretty houses in green fields. It's kind of lifeless, right? You don't see kids playing outside. You don't see people walking outside, riding their bikes, like typical things you see in an inner city when you're just filled with a bunch of people. And that within itself can be isolating and lonely as well. And I understand why some people want to live in these types of neighborhoods because they're very peaceful. Like, I myself am living in this type of neighborhood currently. Hopefully, I leave soon. And yeah, it's peaceful, but at the same time, it gets really boring. And I remembered before I was living here, I was living in the inner city. Now, I was an inner city kid, and I did enjoy being an inner city kid and living in my neighborhood where people were outside and there was more noise going on. And I just liked walking to school every morning when I was in middle school. This also translates, though, to our car centric cities because of suburbia. People have to make cars that caters to these types of neighborhoods and to these types of roads for these buildings as well that most people go to, like Walmart, McDonald's, Burger King, these places. And because of cars, we don't have much public transit. Nothing is not much community shared stuff, like I said before. And it also puts more pressure and stress on people if they don't have a car. They can't go anywhere. Like, you need a vehicle to go to point A to point B. And what about people who don't have a driver's license or who can't afford a car? You're pretty much just screwed. And not saying that cars shouldn't exist, but we should have something more community share, like buses and public transit, and that's overall better for the environment, because cars are pretty detrimental to the environment and they're more dangerous. Like, you're way more likely to die in a car crash on the daily basis of you just driving than you are dying in a plane crash, but yet people are afraid to go on planes. But God forbids you suggest something, yeah, like we should have something that is cheaper and safer and easier, and that's a somewhat more community use. We can share something. People get mad and they'll call you this type of thinking, it creates selfish people. It creates people who cannot fathom being around others and sharing space with others. And I think the pandemic has affected people even more when it comes to this type of thinking. American cities overall just look very bland and boring to me. They all kind of look the same. Small towns look the same to me. Big cities look the same to me. They're all just filled up with a bunch of gray buildings, and it kind of just looks sad and depressing. It kind of just, like, the entire life of the city just got sucked out of. Like, I guess that's why I love downtown so much, because that's the most fun I would see from a city. Like, places are a tad bit more walkable. People on their bikes, you see people outside, the buildings look nice and pretty. There's like plants everywhere outside, there's pretty flowers everywhere, there's pretty lights everywhere. There's people providing entertainment everywhere. There's paintings, there's monuments on buildings. It just makes everything feel more lively. And I hate the fact that my city doesn't even have a downtown. I have to go to other cities to explore downtowns, and I just love doing it because it just gives me that cozy feeling that I think a city overall should look like. Like, we have this thing called jaywalking. If you walk, like, before you get the permission of a car, that's seen as illegal. Like, you as a person walking is not prioritized as safely as someone in a big metal death trap, basically. They create these buildings so they can create more space for big ass parking lots instead of just putting a bus there. So not many people have to use a car and everything is not as congested. It's so hard to find a parking lot in cities, very big cities like Atlanta. Like, every parking lot is taken up. Like, where am I supposed to park? Where am I supposed to find space? Just nothing but big buildings and big parking lots and tiny little sidewalks and just roads. That's it. See, but the way you see and think about everything in the big picture is also kind of weird, though. Like, this idea that everything has a price, like, because growing up, we were told that nothing in this world is free. Like, even basic necessities, you needing a place to lay your head at, food and water, those things have a price on it. And not only they have a price on it, they're expensive these days. And things that we need to live should not be so pricey. And it's kind of and even healthcare is also paid through by your job. If you don't have a job, you don't have healthcare. And it's messed up when you think about it. It's like, if you don't work, you don't have the right to live. If you don't work, you don't get money. And then if you don't get money, you can't live, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't lay your head at. Like, you don't have the freedom to live. And it's funny because people say that we do have freedom, but like, do we really? If you think about it in that way. This is a really grim way to end this episode, but it's the truth though. But I want you to take this episode like this. Take it as motivation and inspiration for us to hopefully get together and make more change in the world, where life doesn't have to be this way for everyone. And hopefully one day we can succeed that. Thank you, and have a good day.